Dawn breaks grey over the Allegheny Iron Works, March 1887. The first shift bell hasn't rung yet. Thomas Brennan, third shift foreman, pulls open the heavy oak door to the Flywheel Hall, a cathedral of cast iron and brick where the main power distribution system sits dormant between runs. He expects silence. He expects cold steel and the smell of old grease. Instead, he hears breathing, not human breathing. A low, rhythmic wheeze of metal on metal, almost subsonic. The kind of sound you feel in your sternum before your ears register it. Brennan raises his lantern. The flame shivers. The flywheel is turning, 15 feet in diameter. 22 tons of machined cast iron, mounted on a horizontal shaft the width of a man's thigh. It rotates slowly, perhaps one revolution every 8 seconds, perfectly smooth, perfectly silent, except for that deep, atonal hum that seems to come from the building itself. No steam feeds the engine. The boilers are cold, banked for the night. No belt drives connect to the wheel. The leather straps hang slack on their pulleys, limp and useless. Brennan sets the lantern on the workbench. He watches the wheel complete another rotation. Then another. The surface is a blur of machined grooves catching lamplight, a hypnotic spiral of shadow and iron. He places his palm against the nearest support column. The steel is vibrating. By the time the morning shift arrives, 6 men stand in a half-circle around the flywheel, saying nothing. They've checked everything twice. Brennan sent a runner to the boiler house, cold. Checked the reduction gears, disengaged. Examined every belt, every coupling, every possible source of mechanical input. The wheel continues its lazy, inevitable rotation. Could be residual steam pressure, offers young McAvoy, a machinist's apprentice. Trapped in the cylinders, maybe. Brennan shakes his head. I vented every valve myself last night, bled the system dry, compressed air, from where the men shift uncomfortably. One of them, an older Scot named Dunbar, crouches near the bearing housing. He listens, ear nearly touching the bronze collar where the main shaft rides on all soaked felt pads. Bearings are warm, he says quietly. Not hot, just warm, like they've been running for hours. They have been, Brennan says. Dunbar straightens. Aye. But driven by what? The question hangs in the cold morning air. Somewhere in the building's upper galleries, a hammer drops. The metallic clang echoes through the framework, a bright, sharp sound that fades into that same low-frequency hum, as if the building itself absorbed the impact and returned it as a single, sustained note. The flywheel continues turning. One rotation every 8 seconds, smooth as clockwork. 3 nights pass. The phenomenon does not stop. Worse, it's getting faster. On the first night, Brennan timed the rotation at 8 seconds per revolution. By the second night, 7 seconds. Now, on the fourth night, it completes a full turn in just under 6 seconds. The flywheel is accelerating. Not violently, not dangerously, but measurably, undeniably gaining speed with no apparent source of energy. The men have stopped trying to explain it with simple answers. They've checked and rechecked every mechanical system in the building. They've drained and refilled the bearings. They've examined the shaft for warping, the mounting bolts for looseness, the foundation blocks for cracks. Everything is normal. Everything is correct. And still the wheel turns faster each night. The sound has changed. That low hum, initially barely perceptible, now resonates through the entire structure. You can feel it in the floorboards, in the iron columns, in the window glass, which vibrates with a faint, continuous rattle. Brennan stands at the center of the hall, eyes closed. The building feels alive. Not haunted, nothing so theatrical, but alive in a mechanical sense, like a sleeping engine ticking as it cools, except this engine is warming up. On the floor beneath the flywheel, a thin layer of dust has begun to spiral. Not blown by wind, not scattered randomly, but moving in slow, concentric circles, drawn by some invisible force into a pattern that mirrors the wheel's rotation. Lantern flames dance, not from drafts, but in rhythm with that deep structural hum. The light casts moving shadows across the brick walls, shadows that seem to pulse, to breathe. One of the night workers, a young man named Peterson, refuses to enter the hall after dark. It's wrong, he says simply. The whole room feels wrong. George Ashford, chief engineer of the Allegheny Works, arrives on the fifth day with a leather case of instruments: calipers, micrometers, steel rules, a brass plumb bob, and a pocket watch accurate to 3 seconds per day. He is a methodical man, 40 years old, trained at the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. He does not believe in mysteries, only in incomplete data. "Show me," he says to Brennan. They walk the perimeter of the flywheel together. Ashford measures bearing clearances: 0.015 inches on the drive side, 0.013 on the dead side. Within tolerance. He checks shaft runout with a dial indicator, less than 0.02 over the full length. Excellent. He examines the lubrication. The bearing pads are saturated with sperm oil, dark and viscous, fed from cast iron reservoirs mounted above each housing. The oil temperature reads 98 degrees Fahrenheit, warm but not excessive for a bearing in operation. "Residual torque?" Ashford asks. "Checked," Brennan says. "No stored energy in the coupling. No wound springs, no compressed accumulators." Ashford places his hand on the shaft, just behind the outboard bearing. He leaves it there for 30 seconds, feeling the slow rotation, the subtle vibration traveling through the steel. "How fast now?" Brennan consults his notes. 5.2 seconds per revolution as of this morning. Increasing rate. Approximately 0.3 seconds faster each day. Ashford removes a small notebook from his vest pocket and performs a quick calculation. At current acceleration, the wheel will reach operational speed, 60 RPM, in approximately 11 days. Operational speed? Brennan looks alarmed. "We're not running any equipment off this shaft." "No," Ashford agrees, "but the wheel doesn't know that." It's Dunbar, the old Scot, who first notices the correlation. He's working late in the stamping shop, 2 buildings east of the Flywheel Hall, when he feels the familiar rhythm under his feet. The building's frame transmits every impact of the 3-ton drop hammer, a deep, percussive thud every 4 seconds as the hammer rises and falls, shaping hot iron into boiler plates. Thud. 4 seconds. Thud. 4 seconds. Thud. Dunbar stops mid-stride. He counts. The hammer operates at 15 strokes per minute when running continuously. 15 strokes per minute equals 1 stroke every 4 seconds. The flywheel, when he last checked, was completing 1 rotation every 5 seconds. He runs, literally runs through the connecting corridor, past the forge hall, past the tool crib, into the flywheel hall where the wheel continues its patient acceleration. Brennan is there, making his nightly inspection. "The stamping press," Dunbar gasps. "Listen." They stand in silence. The flywheel hums, the building hums, and beneath it all, transmitted through the structural frame, the rhythmic impact of the drop hammer 200 feet away. Thud. The flywheel completes 1/3 of a rotation. Thud. Another third. Thud. Another third. "It's sinking," Brennan whispers. Not perfectly, not yet, but close enough that the pattern is unmistakable. The flywheel is somehow coupling with the distant stamping press, absorbing its rhythm, matching its frequency. Ashford returns with 2 assistants and a device he calls a vibrograph, a delicate mechanical instrument that traces oscillations onto a rotating drum wrapped with smoked paper. They mount sensors at 6 locations: on the flywheel shaft, on the main support columns, on the floor joists, on the exterior walls, and at 2 points along the building's central trusswork. The vibrograph drums rotate, styluses quiver and dance. Thin white lines appear on the blackened paper, sinusoidal curves representing the building's hidden vibrations. Ashford examines the traces with a magnifying lens. "Extraordinary," he mutters. The building, this entire massive structure of brick and iron and timber, is vibrating at multiple frequencies simultaneously. Most are random noise: wind loading, thermal expansion, the impact of machinery throughout the complex. But three frequencies stand out. Three clear, sustained oscillations that appear in every trace. 2.3 Hz, a low rumble, barely perceptible. This matches the natural resonance of the building's main frame, the frequency at which the entire structure wants to vibrate if given the slightest periodic input. 0.25 Hz, the stamping press. 15 impacts per minute translates to one impact every 4 seconds, or 1/4 Hz. 0.19 Hz, the flywheel's current rotation rate, one revolution every 5.3 seconds. They're coupling, Ashford says, pointing to the traces. Look here, the flywheel frequency is drifting upward toward the press frequency, and both are exciting the building's primary resonance. Brennan studies the paper. You're saying the building is feeding energy into the wheel. Precisely. Every time the drop hammer strikes, it sends a pulse through the structural frame. Most of that energy dissipates as heat or sound, but a small fraction, Ashford taps the vibrograph trace, a very small fraction reaches the flywheel at exactly the right phase to accelerate it, degree by degree, revolution by revolution. 23 years later, in 1910, a young engineer named Harold Whitman publishes a paper in the Journal of Applied Mechanics titled Harmonic Acceleration of Undriven Rotating Masses in Resonant Structures. The Allegheny incident is his primary case study. Whitman's analysis reveals the mechanism in full. First, structural resonance. The Flywheel Hall, built in 1872, sits on a shared foundation with 3 other workshop buildings. The entire complex forms an acoustically coupled system, a lattice of iron columns and timber beams that transmits vibrations across hundreds of feet. When the stamping press operates, it excites the building's natural resonance at 2.3 Hz. Second, harmonic coupling. The flywheel, with its enormous rotational inertia, acts as a mechanical filter. It cannot respond to high-frequency vibrations. Those simply rattle the bearings and dissipate as heat. But low-frequency oscillations, particularly those matching the wheel's own natural frequency, can couple with its rotation. The building's resonance creates a periodic twisting force in the shaft mounting frame, microscopically small but perfectly timed. Third, micro-oscillatory torque accumulation. Each vibration pulse delivers a tiny impulse to the flywheel. Individually, these impulses are negligible, but they arrive in phase with the wheel's rotation, always pushing in the direction of motion, never opposing it. Over hours, then days, these micro-torques accumulate. The wheel gains angular momentum one imperceptible increment at a time. Fourth, thermal contraction effects. As the building cools overnight, the main shaft contracts by approximately 0.003 inches. This subtle change in bearing geometry reduces friction for several hours, allowing the accumulated momentum to manifest as visible acceleration. Fifth, friction modulation. The lubrication itself plays a role. Sperm oil, when left undisturbed, develops a stratified viscosity profile. The top layer thins and spreads, creating regions of ultra-low friction at the bearing contact points. During these windows, typically between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., the wheel experiences less resistance, allowing those accumulated micro-torques to become observable rotation. The result, a flywheel that appears to violate conservation of energy, but in fact operates within physical law. It doesn't create energy. It harvests it, stealing tiny fractions of momentum from a building that resonates like a massive tuning fork. The Allegheny flywheel ran untouched for 11 days before reaching 60 RPM and stabilizing. At that speed, the frictional losses balanced the harmonic input, and acceleration ceased. Ashford's solution was elegant. He installed rubber isolation pads under the flywheel support columns, breaking the acoustic coupling with the building frame. The wheel coasted to a stop over the course of 3 days. The stamping press continued its work, but the vibrations no longer reached the Flywheel Hall. The case became famous in engineering circles, a cautionary tale about the hidden dynamics of industrial structures. Modern buildings account for such effects. Foundations are isolated. Machinery is balanced and damped. Resonances are calculated and avoided. But in the archives, Brennan's logbook remains. Page after page of careful observations, rotation times, bearing temperatures, the spiral patterns in the dust. On the final page, a single note in his precise handwriting. A machine at rest is never truly still. It waits, it listens, and given the right frequency, the right moment, the right accumulation of invisible forces, it remembers what it was built to do. The Allegheny Iron Works closed in 1931. The buildings were demolished in 1947, but the principle remains, encoded in every structure humans build. That motion can hide in stillness, that energy can accumulate in silence, and that even in the absence of obvious cause, the world finds ways to turn. The flywheel is long gone, melted down for scrap during the war effort. But somewhere in the mathematics of resonance and inertia, it still spins.